You've reached the age where people stop asking how you are and start assuming you're fine, because your life looks fine. You have a name, a past, a set of accomplishments you can point to when the silence gets too loud. Maybe you've built a family, a career, a reputation, or maybe you've just survived long enough to make it look like you know who you are, but inside, something has begun to rot. Not in a loud, dramatic way, quietly, like wood eaten from the inside. A kind of spiritual erosion. It's not depression, not exactly. It's the slow awareness that the version of you who made it this far can't take you any further. What once protected you now imprisons you. The armor that helped you survive, the roles, the strength, the perfection, the smiles, has become your cage. This is not a crisis. This is not a breakdown. This is the second death. The first death is biological, the one that ends your body. The second death is existential. It's the moment your persona begins to disintegrate. The persona you built to be loved, to be admired, to be enough, and you can feel it. In the late-night silence, in the way conversations bore you, in the way success now feels like a performance, in the mirror where your face doesn't lie even if your words still do. Carl Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." But fate is no longer a mystery to you. It's a mask, and it's slipping. There comes a point, often after 40, when life no longer demands you to climb. It demands you to descend, to go inward, to face the basement you locked years ago, the cries you ignored, the truths you couldn't afford to feel. You can't run anymore, not without losing the last piece of yourself, and the most terrifying question begins to whisper, what if everything I defend as who I am is exactly what's keeping me from truly living? This is where the second death begins. Not with fireworks, but with silence. For decades, you wore the costume so well, you forgot it wasn't your skin. You became the reliable one, the strong one, the achiever, the good son, the one who doesn't complain, doesn't break, doesn't stop. The version of you that the world could accept, maybe even admire, and maybe in some deep and buried way, the version you thought would finally be enough. But the stage lights have dimmed, the audience has thinned. And now, in the quiet backstage of your own existence, something feels wrong. The applause doesn't reach you anymore. The mask no longer fits. You smile, but it doesn't feel like you. And maybe, just maybe, it never did. Until your 40s, the ego had a job to protect, to give form to your fear, to give you a role in a world that doesn't wait for those still figuring out who they are. But protection becomes paralysis when the danger has passed. You're no longer at war, but you keep wearing the armor. You keep pretending the battlefield is still out there. When the real war now lives inside, the slowing of life on the outside becomes a scream on the inside, because the pain isn't coming from failure, it's coming from the story you never lived, from the emotions you buried so deep that even your own soul stopped knocking. You're not lazy, you're not broken, you're exhausted from holding up a character, from waking up every day and acting in a play you didn't audition for, but couldn't afford to leave. There is a grief that comes with success, a grief for the self you had to abandon in order to become someone they could applaud. And now, at this hour of life, the mask is cracking, and behind it, there's not a monster, but a stranger. One who doesn't want to be seen, but who has been waiting to be real. It doesn't happen in a single moment. It's not one collapse, one trauma, one scream. It's the accumulation of silences, the daily betrayals of your own truth, the little lies you tell just to get through another conversation, another meeting, another evening pretending everything is fine. Every time you silence a truth, even a small one, a window in your soul fractures. At first, it's just a hairline crack, barely noticeable. You keep going. You tell yourself it's nothing, that it's just stress, that it'll pass. But slowly, invisibly, those cracks multiply. You stop recognizing your own voice. You stop asking yourself real questions. You learn to nod instead of feel, smile instead of speak, perform instead of pause. And soon, the house you live in, the house of yourself, isn't a home anymore. It's ruins held up by habit and reputation. You dress it up, you decorate the outside. You learn to move through the day with efficiency, even grace. But inside, everything is crumbling, and you know it, even if you don't say it. Silence becomes your anesthesia, the quiet of routine, the numbing rituals of productivity. You stay busy because busyness is safer than introspection, because if you stopped, if you truly stopped, you'd hear it. That echo, that dissonance, that voice beneath the performance whispering, "This isn't me, not really, not anymore." But you keep going. You scroll, you smile, you spiritualize your pain with borrowed phrases and shallow truths. You talk about energy and flow and alignment, but you can't even look at yourself in the mirror without flinching, because the real pain is still there, underneath it all, waiting. And the longer you avoid it, the more those windows shatter, until there's no light left to let in. Only reflections of who you used to be. There's a silence that begins to grow between your 40s and 50s, but it's not peace. It's a kind of internal suffocation. The space between who you became and who you really are has widened so much, you can't bridge it anymore with effort or hope. Studies say unhappiness peaks between 42 and 47, but you didn't need a study to know that. You feel it in the mornings that begin without meaning, in the nights that end without rest, in the heavy sense that time has accelerated and yet somehow you're stuck. The future that once felt infinite is now shrinking behind you. And the present is no longer something you live in, it's something you endure. You look around and see the results of a life, maybe children, a house, a name that others respect, but inside, the child you once were, the one you buried under responsibility and resilience, has started to scream again, not in tantrums, but in quiet grief. Grief for the dreams you diluted, grief for the risks you didn't take, grief for the truths you edited out of your story just to be accepted, just to survive. It's not just regret, it's something deeper, a sense of psychological death. Because survival without self is not life, it's maintenance. And maintenance without meaning becomes unbearable. You feel you should have figured it out by now, that you should have arrived, that you should know how to be happy, how to rest, how to feel, and yet everything still feels unfinished. You've kept your family alive, your career afloat, your image intact, but somewhere along the way you stopped checking if you were still breathing. You survived, but maybe you never truly lived, and that truth, it doesn't destroy you, it empties you, quietly, elegantly, until even your victories feel like echoes. You've learned how to talk about truth. You say you're intuitive, that you're healing, that you're working on yourself. You've read the books, followed the voices, curated the right kind of vulnerability. You speak of energy and presence and depth, but somewhere along the way, the words stopped touching you, because even authenticity became a role, a more elegant one, more praised, more subtle, but still a role. You learned how to seem deep, how to name your patterns, how to confess your wounds with just enough distance that no one could see they were still bleeding. But this isn't self-awareness, it's spiritual camouflage. You've turned your inner work into another stage, another way to avoid the real descent, another shield against the raw, unedited self that doesn't fit into poetic captions or quiet enlightenment. And the truth is, you know it. You feel it in the hollowness that follows your most articulate confessions. You feel it in the way you still reach for distraction right after a moment of supposed clarity. You feel it in the emotional numbness that lingers, even after 1,000 revelations, because being authentic is not about how well you can describe your pain. It's about facing the parts of you that can't be explained, can't be cleaned up, can't be shared for applause. Real truth doesn't make you look wise. It strips you bare. It humbles you, silences you, forces you to live without the safety of self-image. The postmodern ego is clever. It learned how to evolve, how to wear meditation like makeup, how to decorate trauma with tasteful language. But the soul doesn't want beauty. It wants honesty. And that's what terrifies you, not being exposed, but being real, with no one watching. There's a specific kind of terror that settles in after 40. It's not the fear of failure. You've failed before. You've rebuilt before. You've adapted, adjusted, survived. No, this fear is colder, quieter. It's the fear of seeing who you are when all the old roles are gone. Because starting over isn't just about changing your life. It's about losing your identity. The titles, the routines, the familiarity, even if they suffocate you, have become your refuge. There's a rhythm to the repetition, a numb comfort in knowing what version of yourself you're expected to be. You say it's too late to change, that there's too much at stake, that you've come too far to go backwards. But that's not true. It's not too late. It's just that the part of you who built this life is afraid to die. And ego doesn't die peacefully. It clings, it bargains, it spiritualizes its survival. It tells you stories like, "I'm just being realistic," when what it means is, "I'm terrified of emptiness." But the new doesn't begin until the old is mourned. Not resented, mourned. There is no reinvention without grief, because every transformation begins with a burial. The slow, conscious burial of the masks you needed, the dreams that kept you safe, the image that gave you a place in a world you never truly felt part of. What scares you is not the unknown. What scares you is living without your defenses, walking without your titles, speaking without the echo of someone else's expectations. But that's where the soul waits, not in the familiar, in the silence after everything collapses. A silence that doesn't ask you to rebuild yet, only to admit that what you've built no longer holds you. Did you enjoy the content and it made a difference for you? Click on Super Thanks and support our work. You did what they told you. You worked. You achieved. You overcame the chaos of youth and constructed something stable, maybe even admirable. From the outside, you're the proof that discipline works, that persistence pays off. But inside, something feels counterfeit. There's a numbness that success can't reach, a hollowness that no praise can fill. And the deeper truth, the one you avoid even in your most self-aware moments, is this: you were never in it. Not fully, not truthfully, not soulfully. You played the game. You learned the rules. You made the sacrifices. But somewhere along the way, the path you built started leading you away from yourself. Because when your success costs your authenticity, it doesn't feel like victory. It feels like a slow form of death. You look around and see everything you were supposed to want, and yet you feel disconnected, not from life, but from the you that once had dreams that weren't tied to metrics or admiration. The void didn't come from lack. It came from the absence of your soul in the process, from the way you silenced your needs to be productive, from the way you ignored your inner chaos to look composed, from the way you replaced truth with strategy. You succeeded, but at what cost? The soul doesn't care about your income, or your followers, or how efficient your morning routine has become. The soul wants something else, not admiration, but presence, not applause, but contact, not perfection, but truth. And if you feel like you're collapsing now, it's not because you failed, it's because you arrived. But you weren't the one walking. There is a loneliness that no amount of company can touch. It's not social, it's not situational. It's the quiet ache of realizing you no longer recognize the person living inside your own body. Somewhere between doing what was expected and becoming who you thought you had to be, you disappeared. Not all at once, just a little more each time you said yes when you wanted to say no, each time you smiled to avoid conflict, each time you chose to be liked over being known. It's subtle, this kind of exile. It doesn't scream, it whispers, it rationalizes. It tells you you're mature, responsible, balanced. But balance built on self-abandonment is just spiritual vertigo. You look stable. You sound wise, you function. But underneath there's a fracture, and that fracture has a voice. It asks, when did you stop listening to yourself? Not your thoughts, not your strategies, but the raw, unedited voice beneath it all. The one that remembers who you were before you had to perform. You've been a friend to everyone, a protector, a partner, a provider, but to your own shadow, you've been silent. And the ego, it loves that silence because it thrives in control, in image, in predictability. But the soul doesn't care about your plans. The soul only cares about truth, and truth begins where pretending ends. It begins in discomfort, in confusion, in the courage to sit with the part of you that you left behind. Not because you were weak, but because you were trying to belong. Every return to yourself starts with one question. What part of me did I have to kill just to be accepted? The answer won't come in words. It will come in tears, in breath, in a memory you almost forgot. And in that moment, the exile ends. There is a moment no one prepares you for, not a crisis, not a breakdown, but a quiet threshold, where the noise ends, where the justifications dry up, where there's nothing left to fix and nothing left to fake. It happens in silence, not the kind you choose for peace, the kind that chooses you, when even distractions can't reach you, when even your thoughts lose their grip. In that silence, something begins to fall apart, not dramatically, not violently, but with a strange kind of grace. Your name stops mattering, your age dissolves, your job title, your past, your identity, all become irrelevant in the face of one question. If I had no history, who would still be here? This is the ritual of the second death. No fire, no ceremony, just you, in the dark, alone with the mirror of your own awareness. You see your ego for what it is, a shattered mirror. Each shard a role you played, a defense you needed, a pain you carried until it hardened into a personality. And now, those shards are on the floor. There is no script for what comes next. You don't build immediately. You don't rush to create a new identity. You sit, you breathe, you grieve. You observe the ashes without panic, because this isn't about fixing what's broken. This is about letting what's false finally die. And in that stillness, something ancient stirs. Not a voice, not a vision, just presence. You're not ascending. You're not awakening. You're not becoming some perfected version of yourself. You're simply returning to the raw, unfiltered self that never needed a name. And in that return, the second death completes itself, quietly, like a soul exhaling. There is a death that no one will mourn. No funeral, no eulogy, just an invisible disappearance of the version of you that was never real, only required. This death doesn't leave a corpse. It leaves a question. Who am I now that I'm no longer performing? At 40, the body remains. It breathes, it functions, it walks through the world. But the persona, the mask you've worn for decades, begins to rot. Quietly, elegantly, without permission. And you're left with fragments, memories that no longer move you, desires that no longer burn, conversations that feel like rituals, not connections. You try to resurrect the old you, the efficient, driven, likable version. But it's like wearing clothes that no longer fit, or returning to a language you've forgotten how to speak. Carl Jung called it individuation, the sacred, brutal journey of becoming who you truly are, not who you were trained to be. But before that becoming, there is a reckoning. You must face the truth that most people never do, that the self you defended so fiercely was, in part, a performance stitched together by fear, conditioning, and longing. And now, it's time to stop defending, to let it decompose, to let the ruins stand. Because only in that collapse does something real begin. You are not late. You are not broken. You are simply arriving, naked, breathless, and alive. And what dies after 40 is not you. It's everything you never were.